I think first things first, you're going to be doing spoken word at the Independent in San Francisco on March 12th. Tickets are on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. And I'm going to be giving them away on air at 1077 The Bone on my afternoon drive shift. So this is your second book.
Mm-hmm.
The first book, very well received and made me cry.
Oh, I'm
like
sorry.
Multiple times, literally made me cry. This one I got a little teary, but not as much as the first one, because this one is, I am so loathing to use this term because it's not a self-help book, but in a way it is. But a lot of it is more like the philosophy of Randy Blythe.
Right.
Like how would you describe it? It's your book.
Well, it's kind of weird. It's not exactly a memoir, and I wouldn't call it a self-help book either, you know, even though I own 1 million of them. I always buy them. I'm like, this will fix me. But so far for me, I think it's a book on perspective, on how I am slowly trying to learn how to have a more balanced perspective without making my own mistakes so much in the process. Trying to learn from people who are smarter than me or better emotionally equipped to handle certain situations, and paying attention to what they do, so I don't have to keep on making the same mistakes. So it's kind of a book of essays, you know, and I hope it's not a book of answers like this is how you live your life at all. I think of it as kind of a book of questions. You know, my hope is that the reader will read at it and be like, this dude had this experience or learned this from this person. And it'll make them ask themselves some questions, you know, self-examination, I guess. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Curious, do you think that if 50-something Randy had handed this book to 20-something Randy, it would have been received? Or do you think
some of it? Some of it, and then some of it would have been like, what do you know, old man, you know? So I tried not, that was an important thing with me for a lot of the book, is try not to be too pedantic with it, you know, to like finger pointy, because I can be an old man shaking his fist at the sky every now and then, but I try and catch myself from that and remember, you know, everybody goes through different things at their own pace. So some of it, I think some of it would have resonated with a younger person, but then, you know, 20-something-year-old Randy was a total knucklehead. So he probably, even if it was for his own good, he probably would have just said, nah, screw you, dude, and continued on his own way, you know?
So there is a part in the book that does reach out to people considerably younger than you are. And
yes,
you're very specifically talking to teenagers who are struggling, because let's face it, that's kind of how we all got into this community and this metal scene. I always like to say nobody gets into metal because they're so happy and well-adjusted.
No.
And I think that's a lot of what bonds us together. And I think you do a great job of speaking directly to them. And I'm wondering how to get them to read it.
Right. Well, I think in that I'm kind of hopefully banking on my I hate to use it, my cred in the music world, maybe, you know, that maybe a young person who reads that chapter will read it and be like, oh, this guy is in this band that I like, or my dad likes, maybe even, you know, if they happen to like metal. But I'm hoping that, because I have been through some really messed up things, even in my adult life, and as a young child, I certainly, and as a teenager, didn't feel like I fit in. I'm hoping that's I know it's a universal experience for a lot of us. You know, we don't wind up in metal or hardcore or punk rock because we're the popular ones. You know, we just don't. It's kind of like the island of misfit toys, and I think that can cut through regardless of age. Like I said, I'm not a pedantic old man, but I have been 16 before. I've been in high school. I've felt like a space alien before, and felt certainly judged for being different. And it's my hope that a younger reader reading that can see the truth in those words, because I'm speaking from experience. I am, and hopefully they can take that and internalize it. I want to really encourage young people, I suppose, specifically those that feel different or like oddballs, and tell them it's okay. You got to get through this, because kids today face a whole raft of challenges that you and I didn't. We just didn't. Not everybody was there waiting to document their every fuck up, their every screw up, and put it on the internet for them to be made of forever. And they face a different set of challenges. But the fact of the matter is that I look back on things that were super important to me when I was 15 years old. It was life and death. And now I'm like, what a joke, And I just want kids to know that right now it is a very confusing time. But you can get through it, man. You don't have to do things you'll regret later in life. You just don't. And I think there is a shift towards that in some ways in young people today. Like, it's not as cool to become a drug addict as it used to be.
I know often people will come up to you at shows and say, your music got me through this, your music helped me through that. This does seem to be kind of a collection of specific issues. Did you glean them from things that people told you helped them with, or did you specifically look for things from within that you had experienced, or combination?
Well, I think it's a combination. That's the coolest thing for me as an artist, whether it be my music, my writing, or my photography. And I've had people tell me this about all three of those areas of the artistic realm that I pursue, said that, like, your song really helped me, or my last book, your book really helped me a lot, or even this photograph speaks to me. It helps me. That is I make a good living doing what I do, but money is money, and there is nothing like being told that something you created, and for me, it generally comes out of my own experience, is helping someone. And I feel like I'm paying back all those bands and writers and different artists that made things that spoke to me when I was young. So it wasn't, obviously the first chapter is about this song, The Duke, about a terminal fan, who I wound up having a friendship with during the last month or so of his life, that last couple of months. And that's directly fan related. But most of the stuff is not directly from fans. It's just like me looking at myself and thinking, what do I have that might be useful for someone? And because that's all I have is myself. I can't offer advice from the perspective of a banker or a Navy SEAL or even a plumber. Plumbing terrifies me, but I can offer you advice from plumbing sucks, dude. I've tried it. I suck at it. Shout out to all you plumbers out there. You guys are aquatic geniuses. But I can offer perspective from that of a weirdo, from a guy who didn't fit in, who's lived a kind of messed up life at times and managed somehow to land on my feet.
And speaking of your friend Wayne, who kind of bookends the book,
Right.
Today would have been, I guess, the 10th anniversary of his passing.
Oh.
And I was wondering, a decade after that experience shaped you so much that I don't want to say you based this book on it, but a very strong tenet of this book is based around him and that experience.
Right.
When you look back over this last decade, does it feel like 10 years has passed since that happened?
No, I had no idea that it was 10 years that you brought it up today, but I will send his dad a message later today because we're still in contact. And he read, his dad and his widow read the chapter. I sent it to them before it was important to me that I want the chapter to be of service. It's not just like, this is a cool story I have. You know, I want it to help people. So in order for me to do that with any sort of feeling of moral clarity, I have to clear it with people from his life, you know, before I put something out like this. So that's what I did. And no, it doesn't feel like 10 years. It's very odd, you know, it doesn't. But I'm glad you told me. I'm going to have to send his pops a message when we're done today. I know.
Well, obviously when I started reading, the date stuck out because I was like, wait.
Yeah, sure.
And
it's interesting because I knew the book. The only thing I really knew about the book that I wanted to write about, like I knew I wanted to be about perspective, but two things in particular I wanted to write about were death. I knew I wanted to write about death because that's the ultimate boogeyman. That's the ultimate fear of everyone. And I watched this young man, you know, die at age 33, I believe it was, with a lot of grace and a lot of dignity. And it was, for lack of a better word, inspiring. So I wanted to convey that, not just to honor him, but to certainly to honor him, but not just that, but to convey the sort of message that this boogeyman is something that's coming for us all eventually. And it is possible to handle it with grace, because I think people are so afraid of death right now. You know, I think they don't like to even see it in their own family members. That's why so many old people get shut away in homes and stuff, and they don't want to see the decline of their relatives. And that really bothers me, I'll be honest. Historically, when people die, even in less than 100 years ago, people used to have the body in their house, you know, and it's a part of life. We're all going to die. And I think people are super uncomfortable with that. And it's something, as you know, I get older, I'm going to be 54. While I'm out on tour, I'll be 54. It's something I feel my mortality more and more, but it's something I have to be comfortable with, you know, because otherwise I'm just going to be afraid, you know, and I don't want to waste what time I have here. So I knew I wanted to write about death, and I knew I wanted to write about surfing because it you know, has shaped my perspective for the better, and it's led to some pretty cool stuff for me, even some environmental work. So death and surfing, those were the only two things I knew I really wanted to write about. And from there, I didn't know how the book was going to end, but without giving the end of the book away, it returns to the first story. It's bookended. It's very circular in a good way. So I'm pleased with that, you know, but I don't know. Otherwise, death and surfing, that could have been an alternate title for it, I guess.
It's actually not a bad title.
Yeah.
Side note, did you see that December 22nd surfing video from Mavericks?
Oh my God.
Record wave that they haven't confirmed yet, but is probably going to be
yeah, those people are a different breed. I know a big wave surfer from Australia named Kirby Brown, and there's a documentary about him. Look him up, Kirby Brown. He's from Perth area on the west coast of Australia. He's a lunatic. He surfs these huge slab big waves where you see dry reef at the bottom of it. It's like you're out of your mind. Yeah, he's paid the price. But yeah, I did see that wave from Magbird. So those people are you know, I'm good with waist to chest, peeling. I'm good just cruising.
I'm the first person to admit that I am a terrible, terrible surfer, but I love doing it and I can't not. And I'm happy to just go to Lindemar, where you know everybody knows the Taco Bell, and just chill on little 2-3 footers. It's fine.
Nothing like it, man. It's the best.
You just got to paddle out. And I'm always trying to explain that to people. And
surfing sucks. Don't do it. We don't need more. It's horrible. Don't do it. It's not going to change your life.
Don't do it at Lindemar. It's already too crowded. I can't do it. Honestly, it's true. Weekends at Lindemar, 100 boards in the water minimum. Whoa, and it's not a large break, you know. And it's just really difficult, especially in the summer months when the waves are really small out here. We have kind of a reverse thing. You want to go in the winter if you want good waves, and in the winter here it's bloody freezing. But it's hard to explain to people because they're so afraid of the ocean. And I think you do a great job of both scaring the hell out of them with sharks, but also explaining why it's worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, just to give like a little snippet of how you tell someone it's good to get in the ocean.
Well, I mean, I also write that it might not be for everyone, because if you're
Truly.
if you're scared and don't know what you're doing, then maybe you should get some swimming lessons and go into a swimming pool first, because it's a different experience. But for me, I write about surfing in this book because it's I mean, it's cliche. You hear it described as a meditative Zen-like experience, but for me, the world is so distracted. There's so much input. There's so many screens. There's so much to listen to, so much to see, so much to read, and it's constantly coming at you 24/7. It's hard to shut it off and just be a normal human being. And our brains, we have the same brains pretty much as we did when we were cavemen. They've gotten a little bit more efficient, but not much, really. So the caveman brain is not designed for TikTok and YouTube and 24/7 CNN and Fox News and MSNBC and screens everywhere and blah, 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 blaring at you. So we're in like this data overload. And no wonder people are so distracted. The thing about surfing is when you are in the ocean and you actually catch a wave and you're cruising down the wave, you can't really think. You can't think because everything is constantly changing. You can think, okay, before you take off, I need to angle my takeoff a little bit better. But once you're up and you're on the wave, you have to deal with the wave because it's constantly changing. Therefore, you are in a state of constant in this moment. Everything happens in this moment when you're surfing. And a wave may only be 6 seconds, but it can seem so much longer because you're so hyper present. You're so present, you're really present. And that cleans all the garbage out of your head for a little bit. It just does. When you are entirely focused on this very second, which is constantly changing, you can't think about all that other stuff. And I think that's one reason why it's so addictive, other than the fact that it's just fun. And it is good for you though. But I heard that some people get sort of the same thing out of like running. I've heard there's like a runner's high. Some people say golf. I don't quite understand that, but surfing's my thing. But whatever works. I think it's good for people to try and shut down the monkey mind some whenever they can.
And I think it's a community that has both like the dichotomy of community and isolation, because if you're out in the water, there's other people out in the water, but when you're catching a wave, that's just you. There's no one else. No one else can reach you. They like literally, physically, mentally cannot reach you with anything other than don't die on this wave.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's the other thing is, like, surfing is a great leveler. Like I've met Lamb of God fans in the water, and they'll paddle up and they'll be like, dude, are you Randy from Lamb of God? I travel and I surf on tour whenever I can. Yeah, what are you doing here? I'm like, oh, we're playing a show tonight at whatever, or I'm in this studio in this area. I'm just catching some waves. And they're like, right on. And we'll talk for a little bit, but the whole time they're looking at the waves, right? It's not like when they meet you somewhere, like it's a much more equal footing because they're there to surf, right? And if a wave comes, they aren't going to miss it because I'm the dude from Lamb of God. It's a much more, I don't know, communal sort of thing. And every time I've surfed, when I've met Lamb of God fans in the water at surf, I had a great time with them, because we're there for the same purpose. It's not like I'm on stage and they're in the audience. It's like we are there to do something, the same thing. And it's that feeling when you surf with people. It's just so good.
Now, all of the chapters in the book are a soundtrack. And
yes.
Of course, my favorite is going to be Bonzo Goes to Bitburg, because the Ramones are my favorite band.
Right.
And I'm wondering if you chose that title because of the kind of punk rock guilt aspect of going to the Chelsea after it had been renovated, kind of paralleling with Reagan going to the cemetery where Nazis had been buried that spawned this song, or am I just reading into it?
That's I was thinking about, because ADD lived at the Chelsea, and I'm going to be going there in a few days, as a matter of fact, because I'm going to go do a podcast in New York, and I'm going to stay there and do some filming while I'm there. But I was thinking of what an appropriate song was for there, and I just love Bonzo Goes to Bitburg, and there is definitely kind of a connection with it, this sort of the punk rock guilt thing with it,
Feeling that betrayal, but also understanding that
yes,
it's
yeah.
there's a rationalization there that isn't out of pocket.
Yeah, 100%. So, yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that. I was in the New York thing, like writing about the Chelsea and going there. I could have chose a few different bands, but the Ramones just seemed. Dee Dee Ramone wrote a whole book called Chelsea Horror Hotel, which is kind of like a fictionalized autobiography of his time there. It gets really kind of weird. My editor, at the beginning of where I list all the people that live there, my editor used to go there to visit with a guy named Herbert Hunke, who was one of the sort of contemporary, a lot of the Beats. He knew Ginsberg and Kerouac and all them, and he lived there. So since the people I know who have experience in New York, who've read that chapter, like, I used to do this in the Chelsea. Our management used to work for Sanctuary. Two of the guys, Bob Johnson and Corey Brennan, from my management with my band, they used to work for Sanctuary, and their offices were in the Chelsea. It's like, I can't believe someone had an office in the Chelsea. It's kind of weird, but it's still a neat place.
Is it because what you did is kind of what I've always wanted to do, is just go stay at the Chelsea and then kind of tool around New York and hit the spots that I've always heard about or read about, because being a San Francisco fan of the Ramones, they're
right.
missed everything. And you did that, and I started thinking about how, God, maybe it's not worth it. Maybe I don't want to stay at the Chelsea because it's been renovated and it's kind of lost.
I think it is. There's still some long-term residents there. There's a documentary about the Chelsea. I can't remember the name of it. It's something, I'll have to look at it later. If you look it up, there's a documentary about the Chelsea Hotel while it was undergoing renovations, and how the some of the tenants left, but the other one stayed because they got their rent control. Yeah, which is crazy in New York. But when my girlfriend and I were there, she wound up meeting one of these old women who was an artist from the documentary, one of the OG artists from the Chelsea. And we're going to go there. Like I said, I'm going to do some filming, but she's going to go, her name is Mel. She's going to go and visit her. She got her phone number in her apartment and take some photos in her apartment, because my girl's a photographer as well, So it's cool. I think it's worth it. You definitely think about it and you're like, it's not the same, but like, I'm not a New Yorker, neither are you. So we ought to go and see some history, I think.
So for your photography, that fits right into a lot of what your photography vein is, right? Because you've been kind of collecting people whose stories should be valued more than they are. And is that going to be the next book?
The photography book needs to happen. It's just a matter of finding time in my writing schedule for the band, my touring schedule with the band, the writing schedule and touring for the book. That's as I get older. It's one of the great things about being sober for me, is that the sort of creative blanket of mush that had been slammed on top of me by all the drugs and alcohol I did, when it got lifted, it's like my brain is overflowing with ideas on things I want to do. And that's great, but it's also a problem because I have to focus. I can only do one thing at a time. And doing a photography book is going to require a long-term commitment of focusing and going through things. So maybe I'll have to find someone to help me go through all this stuff and shape it, kind of like a producer for a record,
I mean, I would imagine that it would kind of be like 2 books in one, because it would be both a photography book and an actual, novel, because of the stories that you're collecting from these people. They have to go together.
Yeah. Well, I have been taking photos. I have a long-term photo project going called Frontman, and it's pictures of singers of bands, men, women. There's a trans singer. So it's just called Frontman out of grammatical convenience. I'm not going to call it front person. Sorry, I'm just not. I'm a front man. And it's the first person I took a picture of was HR from the Bad Brains, a portrait of him backstage. And then I've gotten lots of other, pretty well-known people from our community, and then other areas of music. And I want to take it's going to be this portrait of each front person, each singer. And then on the other page, it's going to be about why this person is important to me, and why I want to take their photo, because the criteria for me to take a picture for this Frontman project is either they have to be someone whose music has influenced me, someone I'm a fan of, or someone I've worked with. And for a lot of them, it just combines into this all three, but I think it's, and I'm doing them all like available light, very off the cuff, like, hey, let me take your picture real quick backstage. No, not done up or anything. Just trying to catch them in an unguarded sort of moment. And I've gotten some pretty neat portraits so far. But there'll be like kind of stories with each picture.
So I guess, can you sketch out the next year or two? I mean, being in the band's already got their stuff sketched out, right?
It's being sketched out. For me, sketching out the next year or two, that's kind of rough.
But it's fair. Just give me the bullet points.
I mean, we'll do some festivals, the band will, this year, and we have our cruise. And I suppose we will eventually start getting together and going through demo ideas, no, we're not in the studio right now. People are like, John, our bass player, did an interview where he's like, well, it's time to start working on music again. Everybody's like, are you going in the studio? It's like, no, dude, we're always working on music. It's just, we're off the road for a minute. But for me right now, my main focus is promoting this book. And I've been doing a lot of press for it, a lot of podcasts and so forth. And that will continue on after the book's release, because I think books sell slower than records do. It takes a while sometimes for them to find their audience. So I'm going to continue to promote this thing. And I liked it because we have a pretty light touring year, I'd like to just kind of enjoy myself a little bit.
Yeah. Has the cruise taken a little bit of that pressure off of the touring?
Yeah, I mean, like, even if we weren't to tour, we do not have to tour, forever. We're not slaves. It's okay. We can take time off and relax, like, we don't live in New York City or Los Angeles. We live in Virginia. It's not as expensive. You can be wise with your money and take a little time off and enjoy your life. We're getting old. Sometimes that's best for a band.
I mean, I'm sensing that you're hearing some pressure to tour. I'm not trying to project that. I feel like it's out there.
There's always pressure to tour from everyone, not necessarily management or whatever. I mean, they've offered us some gigs a year, and we're like, no, we're chilling for a little bit. We're gonna do a few.
With older, bigger bands, they're reaching that point where it's like, okay, our health, we're prioritizing our health, our work-life balance, and we start doing things a little bit differently. I think Metallica most famously was like, do you want this to keep going? Because if you want us to keep doing this, you're going to have to adjust the way we do it.
Yes, because a lot of my guys have young children. It's like you only get a chance to raise that kid once, and we've been doing this for almost 30 years. 30 years, it's not like we haven't paid our dues. So if we want to kick back for a little bit and work a little smarter, not harder, then we will, we've played everywhere. Everywhere multiple times. It's okay if we don't come back the next month, and also I think absence makes the heart grow fonder, as they say. If you're playing somewhere 3 times a year, people are going to be like, I'll catch them next time,
I think we finally have made up for the post-pandemic glut, of people who didn't get to tour and were in financial straits. I think everybody's kind of gotten that pandemic cycle out of the way, and then we're starting into what looks like it's going to be the new cycle of album release. And I think that we've got everyone still doing it. You've got Judas Priest and Scorpions and bands that have been doing this for 50, 60 years. And we've got, the big four who've been doing this for 40 years. And you guys are coming in at the 30-year mark. We've got bands that are still around for the 20s, 10s, and the new music. And it's actually kind of crazy how much generational metal there is still touring right now.
Yeah, well, when you think about it, man, I really had this conversation with Charlie from Arch Enemy in Europe a few years ago. He's a pretty smart guy. And we were talking about the genre we're in. And heavy metal is a young genre, right? I personally know the people that created heavy metal. I've toured with them, right? I know Black Sabbath. I've toured with them multiple times. And so it's not like saying, I'm in a blues band and, I'm a direct descendant of Robert Johnson, even though we are, all rock and roll is, there's this sort of separation, a sense of antiquity. Heavy metal is still young, and so I think right now we're in it's very interesting you bring this up. We're at a point where eventually the old heads will stop, so if Black Sabbath plays or Judas Priest plays, go see them now, right? Go see them now, because this will be the end of the first wave and it's coming soon, I mean, Halford may tour longer than Lamb of God for all I know. he's an amazing human being. But by very nature of our age, these guys are eventually going to stop. It's true, and then it'll be over. That first generation will never be seen again. I'm lucky enough, I feel like, to have witnessed a lot of these seminal bands and have toured with them. It's really kind of cool when you think about it. But overall, heavy metal is a young generation, a young genre. So it's always funny to me where people are I saw a skit the other day, this English comedic band, they're into metal, and they're this one guy is asking the other guy, he's like, mate, what would you think is a classic, a modern metal classic? And this guy is like, Lamb of God, Ashes of the Wake. He's like, no. And he's like, are you mad? It's totally a modern metal classic. He's like, mate, it's not modern. It's just a classic. It's 20 years old. That guy acts like he's having a heart attack. So it was really funny. I sent him a message like, you guys are funny. But yeah, we're moving into the legacy realm now, and that's okay,
Yeah.
And from the Bay Area, all the birthplace of thrash, we're friends with Death Angel, and they're still at it.
Our guys
Exodus,
are almost all of them still up and at it at this point.
Exodus still at it, Metallica still at it, Testament still at it. I'm going to see Alex in New York in a few days. Actually on book launch day, we're doing a in conversation at a bookstore. So it's great, man. It's just interesting to be sort of within that time frame where the creators, because Black Sabbath is the first metal band. I don't care what anybody says. Absolutely.
I think a lot of younger bands are having trouble finding their scene because the community we came up in was very present. And now everything is very disjointed and online. And
Right.
I'm seeing this strange combination of shows that sell out and shows that have 15 people. And I'm not seeing real rhyme or reason to it.
Right.
And I've really been trying to kind of try and coalesce this in our community and try and figure out what, not where the problem is, but like how to bring people more together. And I love
Right.
that your book has that as one of its main themes of, you know, go out and find your people because they're out there.
They exist. And this technology, and obviously I'm not a Luddite, neither of you are using this technology to record this interview. You know, I'm back home and you're in California. So I'm not a total Luddite, but it has its uses. But I think it's separating us in so many other ways. And I think that this internet technology is kind of one thing I think that is really damaged, I guess, is the concept of the regional scene, right?
Mhm.
So in San Francisco, I just said the Bay Area thrash scene. You know, when I talk to Gary Holt or Kirk Hammett, they talk about how they influenced each other playing, and the bands that came out of that were influenced by each other. And then say you look at like the DC hardcore scene. Of course, you have Bad Brains and Minor Threat and those bands, and they were in the Bad Brains influence Minor Threat, you know, which of course influenced Henry Rollins when he went on into to be in Black Flag. And there was this local sort of vibe. In New Orleans, you got all the like sort of doomier, sludgier stuff. I Hate God, Crowbar, all that stuff. They all share members anyway. New Orleans is really strange like that. And then, you know, in different scenes, there's like this regional feel because all these bands, and there was one in Richmond when we came up, we were influenced just as much by the Richmond bands as any other bands from outside of Richmond, very much so. We all kind of learn from these people. Now with the internet, it's such a crazy, like you can listen to anything from anywhere, which is great, but I think it's kind of removing that sort of cohesive regional scene, which is sort of a self-sustaining ecosystem in a way. You know, like I used to go to see shows. Oh, is there a show? What's going on? It's Tuesday night. Is there a show down at Twisters or Rockets in Richmond? Who is it? I'm not familiar, but it's something to do. I'll go see him because, and you knew some people were going to be there. You know, you knew some of your friends were going to be there. It wasn't like I'm only going to go see this because of this. But like the first time, this is a good story. I went to there was a band from Australia called the Hard-Ons, right? I don't know if you ever heard of them. They're from Sydney, and I loved them since high school. They're kind of like a poppy hardcore band, weird Ramonesy kind of descendancy, but at times kind of metal band. And they were coming to Richmond, and I was like, wow, this is in I think 1989, right? 1989 or 1991. I was like, the Hard-Ons are coming. They're from Australia. I never thought I'd get to see a band from Australia. So I went to the club and I bought a ticket in advance, you know, like 2 weeks in advance. And they were like $5 or whatever for a ticket. And the day of the show comes and I call the club and I'm like, what time are the Hard-Ons going on? Because the internet didn't exist then, right? I mean, it did, but nobody used it except for super nerds. I'm like, what time are the Hard-Ons going on? They're like, bad news. The Hard-Ons canceled. And I'm like, well, can I come get my money back? And they're like, nope, the opening band is still playing. And I'm like, well, who is that? And they're like, we don't know, but we heard them at sound check and they're really good. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, they're really good. You trust us. You need to come. And I'm like, well, you're not going to give me my $5 back. So I carry my ass down to the club. I go down to the club. Everybody was bummed out. There was about 80 to 100 people there, you know, because we were going to go see this band. And then none of us knew who the opening band was. They weren't on the flyer. We're standing there, and then these three dudes walk out on stage, and they're a little bit weird looking. And the singer walks up and he looks at the mic, and he's a singer. He's a bass player. He goes, "Hi, everybody. We're Primus, and we suck." and then it was like they played their whole set for like 45, 50 minutes, and everybody's head. This was when their first album, Suck on This, came out. Everybody's head was ripped totally, completely off. And we're like, play more. And they're like, we don't have any more. We're like, tough shit. You're not leaving. Tough doo-doo. Sorry. Play some more. And we made them replay some songs because they were incredible. And nobody knew who Primus was. You know what I mean?
We did.
Yeah, you did, but I saw him for $5 with 80 other people, and then Les Claypool sold me a copy on vinyl of their first album. You know, they had it on tour, and then they left, and we were like, "Holy crap, that band was awesome!" But nobody knew who they were. You know, so that kind of thing used to happen a lot before the internet. You'd go and discover something, and now it's like, who is this? Let me check this out. Let me have a preconceived notion about this, and it's a bummer, I think. But I mean, it's a good question, because I don't think we're going to go back in time with technology. It's not going to go away, but I think, you know, I don't know, just as to be encouraging, I guess, to support local bands. I think we've always done that, but support your local scene, and don't dismiss them because don't have a record out or whatever.
I think an overarching theme of both of your books is your surreal life, and the operative word in that being real life.
Yeah.
I think that nothing accidentally happens online.
No. No, you're correct. Nothing accidentally, nothing. You're like, oh, you know, this is earth shattering. No, it's just more noise. Go out and be in the real world. Be present.
Yeah, a lot of those jokes that start out with 3 people who walk into a bar are because 3 people walked into a bar.
100%. There's not a lot of jokes that start with, you know,
3 people logged on to a chat room.
3 people logged on to a chat room, or, you know, a man swiped, was doom scrolling and pressed like on a meme. Who gives? Nobody cares. Like, get out, live your life, meet people, be present. It's I don't know. I'll sound like a crazy old man, I guess.
The perfect opportunity for that is March 12th at the Independent for your spoken word. And can you give people an idea of what your spoken word show is like? Because I remember thinking Henry Rollins as the perfect example of a spoken word tour that's a huge success. He's a completely different person on stage in spoken word than he is really with any of his musical acts.
Right. Well, I think you know, I just told you a story about seeing Primus for the first time. There's going to be a lot of stories from my life to illustrate the theme of the book, which I'm trying to get across, which is altering your perspective for the better. But they're going to be rooted, most of them, in my favorite sort of funny stories, me doing something stupid. So I expect it to, you know, I'm going to get up there and talk for an hour and a half, 2 hours, I guess, and tell stories and try and relate to people, try and find some commonality, and just be honest. But I've been working really hard on this stuff. I've sent recordings of what I've been working on to some stand-up comedian friends of mine who do it for a living, and I'm like, give me some advice. And on the main story, they're like, we don't have any advice. This was kept us on the edge of our seat. You're crazy. This is a crazy story from when I was 22 years old, you know, when without giving it away, it's like I got sober when I was 39, and I'm the longer I stay sober, I'm realizing, you know, maybe you drank yourself into alcoholism. Lots of crazy stuff happened with your band, but the signs were there at a much younger age. You were just too stupid to pay attention. And one of the main stories I'm going to tell is utterly insane. It's something that happened to me when I was 22 years old, and it's pretty funny, you know.
And it's not in the book.
No, I'm going to read one excerpt from the book that I timed it out at about 5 minutes. That's it. You know, people are going to have the book. I don't need to sit up there and read from the book to them. So everything else is going to be sort of stories. And they're going to be like the book. There's a definite purpose to this stuff. I'm not just up here, well, I'm going to tell a story about this. It's going to serve the purpose of trying to get across the idea of perspective. But a lot of my perspectives are hard won, and they have come at a price due to my own stupidity, which a lot of times in retrospect is funny. It's funny stuff to me, you know. At the time, it wasn't so funny, but in retrospect, it's hilarious. So I'm going to tell some of those stories. I think people have a good time. You know, I'm not going to get up there and preach at people or anything. We'll have some laughs and do a little thinking.
Is it also a book signing event?
Yes, and then there'll be a Q&A after for it, so people can ask. You know, we'll see what kind of questions they have. And get up and tell some stories, talk about the book a little bit, do a Q&A, and then afterwards, I'll sign as many books as people want. Hang out, take pictures, all that good stuff.
And I haven't avoided talking about your sobriety. I just wanted to give it like its proper place, because I feel like across both your books, your sobriety is almost its own character, because
Right.
there's the pre-sober Randy, and there's the post-sober Randy, and then there's the sobriety that kind of seems to govern basically the narrative.
Yeah, so, it governs everything in my life. It has to, because alcohol governed everything else before. So I write in the book that I see the world through two primary lenses. Number one, I have to see everything through the lens of my sobriety. That's not like, that doesn't mean that I walk around constantly like, I'm an alcoholic. Oh my God, look at these people drinking. That's not it at all. No, I'm not vegan. I'm in a heavy metal band. I'm around drugs and alcohol all the time. You know, if I can't handle that, I might as well just retire and stay home. So, but it is for me, it colors everything the way I view the world. I see the world through a sober lens because I saw everything through the lens of alcoholism before. So naturally, sobriety governs everything. The other lens that I see the world through is through the artistic eye, which has become a lot clearer now that I'm sober. But yeah, I mean, sobriety for me, it just kind of is. And unless I'm like trying to help someone or discussing and writing about my sobriety, in my life, my life as an alcoholic, I am definitely doing it for a purpose beyond just beyond amusing stories or whatever. I'm telling it to let people know that you can, if you have a drinking and drugging problem, it's possible to live a good life without it. You know, it is. I'm living proof, and life gets much, much better. But the view of the world through sobriety it's the only way I view the world, that in the artistic lens. I have to, otherwise I'll croak, you know?
So the character that we haven't met yet, and I'm not saying I want to by any means, is Relapse Randy.
No, hopefully we will never meet him.
We all hope to never meet him, but should it come about, how would you talk to that guy? Because I feel like everybody at this point has lost someone to some level of addiction. And if we're in this industry, we've lost lots of people. Yes. And you on your sobriety journey, I'm sure, know that relapse is overwhelmingly, due to the odds, a factor. Right. How do you address that? How do you be that guy who acknowledges it, lives with it, moves on, hopefully without it?
It's horrible. It's something that, because I have more dead friends than I can count on all my fingers and toes, from drugs and alcohol, and quite a few of them went out. I know COVID, a lot of people went out. You know, the isolation, I guess, for depending on where they were, or not being able to work or all that stuff, it led them back to a drink or a drug, and eventually killed them. It's relapse is not an inevitability, though. For me, it's a matter of every day, every single day, without fail, remaining cognizant of the fact that I am an alcoholic, right? I'm never going to be cured. That doesn't mean I want to drink, that I'm constantly fighting the urge to drink, because I'm not. If I was, I'd be drunk right now, right? I just would. I wouldn't be able to handle that. But I have to remain cognizant of the fact that I am an alcoholic, and that when I drink, something weird happens that doesn't happen to normal people. I don't, I just keep drinking. And that's the only thing I know that's going to happen if I drink, is that I'm going to drink more. It could be a good time, or I could burn your house down. I don't know what's going to happen. And that's something I'm just not going to gamble on. So, for me, when I meet people who have relapsed, none of them, and I do talk to them, none of them have a great story to tell me. None of them are like, dude, I relapsed and it was awesome. It's always like, I wound up homeless in Tijuana, with a venereal disease or something, right? It's never a great story. And when these people tell me this, I'm like, well, you're sober now, man. It's cool. I'm glad you're back. And I also say, thank you. And they're like, what for? And I'm like, thank you for taking the ass whooping for me, and reminding me that it's not going to get any better for me out there, because I did enough research. I drank and did drugs for 22 years. I did it at an Olympic level, right? Very high level partying. I only know a few people who hit it harder than me who are still here in this business. I don't need to research anymore. I just have to remind myself of a few simple truths. And one is that if I put anything before my sobriety, it'll go away. Right. And that may not make sense to some people. Like, do you love your family more than you love sobriety? Yes, of course I do. Of course I love my family more than I love sobriety. But if my sobriety is not intact, my family, I will lose it. I will.
Put on your mask before assisting others.
Exactly. So I have to keep that first and foremost in my mind. And it's not hard, and it's not a bummer. It's not a bummer for me. And, and I get to help people. I get to help people who struggle, just because people help me, they did.
You talk about the first day you got sober.
Yeah.
And because I read the books back to back, I can't remember if it's in the first, the second, or both. But
right. I think I may have touched on it in the second book again briefly. I believe I wrote it out in the first book. I'd have to look.
Then was there a struggle day? The next day, the next week, the next year, where you had to talk yourself down?
In the first, when you get sober, like, right, depending on how far along you are, I was 22 years in, and I was a garbage can. I didn't just drink, I did drugs, all the drugs. Somehow I wound up not getting strung out. I don't know how. I do not. It was not for lack of trying, believe me. I did that stuff for 22 years, right? So when I got sober, it wasn't immediately like everything's great. It was for a little bit. Actually, it was immediate for a little bit. Everything was great because I felt like I wanted to die when I quit drinking. But that wears off. The overwhelming joy at being sober wears off, and real life settles in. So for me, it was rough for about the first 6 months. It wasn't like a constant, like, I want to drink. Sometimes that would come up, and then I'd just talk to someone else who was sober, and they'd be like, dude, you're an alcoholic. This is natural. You drank for 22 years. It's not going to go away overnight, but I just stuck with it because, my last day of drinking, I wrote about it. And like you said, and maybe touch on both of the books, I wanted to vanish from existence. It wasn't like I'm having a bad day. It's like I wanted to be there to be no more Randy. I didn't feel suicidal or whatever. I just wanted to disappear from existence itself. Like, so anything compared to that feeling is better. It really is. But it took a while for my brain to rewire itself. Because when you drink and drug so heavily, the synapses in your brain require substance to meet, and
Yeah.
those neural pathways get burned in. You take that away, you have to regrow new pathways, and it was rough for a little bit. But
Your brain chemicals are like an atrophied muscle that hasn't been
yes,
worked out in so
yes,
long. It doesn't know what to
yeah,
do with your emotions.
yes, 100%. And you just got to ride that out. Some people have it worse than others. Like, I didn't have physical DTs from alcohol either. I was sweaty. I couldn't sleep very well at night for a little while, and then it was gone. But then some people have to be medically detoxed because there's only two substances, the withdrawals of which will kill you, and that's benzodiazepines like Xanax and Klonopin and all that stuff, Valium, and then alcohol. So my metabolism was fast enough, I guess, that it just shunted the alcohol out, and I sweated a little bit. But some people, they have to be medically detoxed because they'll seize and die. It's scary. Um, it was a little rough ride at the beginning, but for me, it was not as bad as wanting to cease to exist.
Now,
Right?
you also credit from your story having a community of sober people on the road
Yeah.
that kind of were your safety net when you made the decision.
Yeah.
And then when you got off the road, how did you build that community? Because I'm assuming, tell me if I'm right or wrong, I'm assuming you have a community of sobriety that you lean on
There's
regularly.
I know tons of sober people. Yeah. I talked to, my band. There's most of us are sober now. There's only one guy that drinks, like, yeah, on the road, we were on tour with Metallica, and, there's James was sober and a bunch of their guitar techs and stuff. And we had been on tour with them for about a year over the course of 2 years total, I guess, off and on. And they saw me getting worse and worse and worse, so a couple of them had said, "Hey man, you looking kind of rough." So when I finally decided to stop, I went to them. I'm like, help me. I don't know what to do. And they did, they're like, kind of talk me down. That's all you need, man. As someone who, a lot of the times, is someone who's been through it and tells you like this is possible, and they relate their own experience. Because rehabs, or some people need to go to rehab, and addiction doctors and all that stuff. They're, God bless them, they're cool and all that stuff. But I didn't trust any of those people. Screw you. You don't know what I've been through, but I trust the guitar tech, who 3 years ago was homeless and smoking crack, who turned his life around. I trust that guy. Why? Because he understands me, right?
Mm-hmm.
The most educated addiction specialists in the world can tell me, hey, you need to do this or do that. And I'm like, what do you know? Like, if I have a problem with my truck, with the carburetor, I'm not going to go to my dentist to ask for advice. I'm going to a mechanic. So for me, it's a critical part of staying connected to people who are sober. And I have a lot of sober friends in the music industry. So we keep up with each other.
Do you think that community just gravitated towards you after you made the decision, or do you think you consciously chose the people that were going to be around you while you were moving?
Consciously chose. I
Yeah.
consciously choose. And once you start, that's the whole thing. Once, even in like the heavy metal touring world or whatever, because not everybody is sober, once you figure out who doesn't drink, they'll be like, oh, you should know so and so over in that band, they don't drink, or this crew member. People let each other know. We let each other know.
There's a lot of, I don't want to say lip service, but there's a lot of talk about the 12-step program. as kind of the key for long-term sobriety. Have you dipped a toe in? How do you feel about it?
I don't know anything about 12 steps programs.
Gotcha. So you feel like you're forging your own path, and if people can learn from it, great.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any answers for anyone. You know what I mean? I just have more questions. So there's different ways to get sober. My advice for people, if you want to get sober, if you're like a drug addict or an alcoholic and you're like, I need help, is go to Google and Google, where can I meet sober alcoholics or drug addicts? I need help, and you'll find some answers. There's various different pathways, but the main thing is you don't have to do it by yourself. I couldn't do it by myself.
And then meet those people in real life.
Yes. Dude, there's people that got sober during the pandemic. I don't know how they did it. More people, I think, like relapsed, but I know some people who are like, yeah, I quit drinking during the pandemic. I'm like, what? Like, yeah, we were in lockdown. I'm like, what? How did you do that?
In your book, the number that you mentioned of people who OD'd during the pandemic was astronomical.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It was just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah. Some of those people were my friends. No longer here.
So for somebody who maybe hasn't read Dark Days and you want to impart the new book to them, because honestly, they're two very different books in general anyway. How would you say you're probably going to want to read this book because?
I mean, which book? The new book?
The new book, yeah.
Okay.
I think they should read Dark Days just because it's a phenomenal story.
Yeah, it's more a straight memoir,
Yeah.
It's a linear sort of narrative, and it's a classic 3-act structure.
This is more of a philosophical kind of question, sort of, here's my dogma kind of book.
I don't know if it's dogma.
My Tao, my philosophy,
it's my experience. Yeah. Okay. I think right now, the world is undeniably confusing and overloaded with wild, crazy events going on, and it's a little bit I don't know how would I put this? These are very weird times we're living in, and the only thing I have any control over is myself and my own actions. I can't even control my initial emotional reaction to something disturbing. What I can do is try not to feed an initial emotional reaction to something. Say something makes me mad. Suppose, Nikki, you stomp on my foot. You're like, your new book sucks, and stomps on my foot. That's going to make me mad, right? But once I leave your presence, I don't have to sit there and stew in it. I don't have to sit there and go, why did you do that? Because that's not doing me any good. All that is feeding that negative emotional state that I'm in, and that does me no good. I can't move forward in any sort of positive manner. So the new book, I guess, is like the whole thing is me asking questions of myself, like, how do I avoid becoming stuck in these counterproductive or useless negative mind states? And I think right now the world is confusing enough that everybody is going to need to ask themselves some questions. So I would recommend that if anybody wants to recommend the book, if they want to ask themselves some questions. And you can also have a laugh at how dumb I was. Sometimes we all need to laugh.
Perfect. I would end up talking to you for like another hour, but I feel like I've kept you long enough.
It's all right.